They say that in life's darkest moments, the brightest lights sometimes appear out of nowhere. Imagine waking up one morning unemployed, drowning in debt, and convinced the world is out to get you, only to discover in the most unexpected way that fate has bigger plans for you. This story begins with a man who risked everything to help a stranger in dire need. In return, he lost the only lifeline he had, his job. Then, unbelievably, as dawn broke the next day, a thundering roar of helicopter blades split the air, delivering a promise so grand it would change his life forever. Daniel Carter woke up in a cramped, drafty one-room apartment on the east side of Cedar Heights. The sun scarcely found its way in through the dusty window, his sole connection to the outside world. Every morning, Daniel felt the hum of the city around him, but there was a gnawing sense that he existed on the outskirts of everyone else's prosperity. He was 32 years old, with a wiry frame, hardened by years of manual labor. A scattering of old scars marked his arms, reminders of the tough construction and warehouse jobs he'd undertaken since dropping out of community college. Today he stared at the peeling wallpaper and crooked picture frames, remnants of fleeting attempts to decorate his home and make it more inviting. Poverty had become more than just a social condition for him. It was a prison that shaped his daily thoughts. He poured himself a cup of weak coffee, tasting bitterness that went beyond the stale beans. He had recently paid rent late again, and his landlord's temper was wearing thin. Still, Daniel tried to remain hopeful. He believed that as long as he woke up breathing, there might be a chance, a flicker of opportunity, somewhere on the horizon. Cedar Heights was a city of contrasts. Glamorous high-rises dominated the skyline, casting long shadows across neighborhoods like Daniel's. Corporate tycoons made million-dollar deals over artisanal lunches, while people like Daniel scrounged to afford a single decent meal each day. On the city's posh west side, the stately mansions were rumored to host lavish parties attended by elites, some of them known to the public, like Mark Cuban, Warren Buffett, and occasionally philanthropic celebrities who breezed through town. For Daniel, these billionaires were distant figures, as unreal as characters in a fairy tale. Daniel's job at Pines & Cumbie Construction was all he had to hold on to. He had been working there for nearly 6 months, hired as a general laborer, when the firm landed a big contract on the outskirts of Cedar Heights. Despite long hours, low pay, and minimal appreciation, Daniel gave it his all. His supervisors found him reliable, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. That morning, he headed to the site early, wearing his fraying steel-toe boots and a high-visibility vest. The construction site sprawled across a wide lot next to a busy highway. Bulldozers and excavators hummed in tandem, metal beams clanged, and the smell of fresh tar hung in the air. Daniel's boss, Mr. Garrity, was a no-nonsense man in his 50s, with a face weathered from years under the sun. Garrity walked with purpose and expected everyone else to do the same. At 7 a.m. sharp, the team huddled for roll call. Garrity bellowed, "Carter, you're on concrete mixing today, and don't be late after lunch." There was always that extra scolding note in his voice, a sign that Garrity looked down on Daniel, perhaps seeing him as an expendable hand. Daniel was used to it. Keeping his head low and doing his job was the only way to stay afloat. His mind drifted as he worked, imagining a future beyond the construction site. He wanted to go back to school, maybe learn a trade that would guarantee a more stable livelihood. Sometimes he fantasized about starting a small contracting firm of his own, where workers would be treated fairly. But he chastised himself for daydreaming. Reality always struck hard when he remembered the paycheck never stretched far enough. Midday, Daniel took his lunch break behind a row of trailers used as makeshift offices. He sat on an overturned bucket, munching on a peanut butter sandwich, because that was all he could afford. The city's hustle seemed distant and faint, the roar of traffic blending with the clang of machinery. Suddenly, a sharp screech of tires ripped through the air, sending Daniel's heart racing. Without hesitation, he dropped his sandwich and ran toward the noise. Beyond the site's temporary fence, a sleek black car had veered off the road, smashing into a steel barrier. Smoke billowed from its hood, and the driver slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from his forehead. Daniel leapt into action, scaling the fence in record time. He ignored the screams of Garrity behind him, who was yelling for him to come back. Adrenaline propelled him forward. At the scene, Daniel yanked open the driver's door. He found a young man, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s, semi-conscious and moaning in pain. The interior of the car reeked of burnt rubber and the acrid odor of the airbag's deployment. Daniel checked for a pulse alive, but the driver was clearly in bad shape. Onlookers gathered, but no one seemed prepared to help. Daniel carefully unbuckled the man's seatbelt and supported his neck, mindful of potential spinal injuries. "Call an ambulance," Daniel shouted. A few bystanders fumbled with their phones, but confusion reigned. When the man opened his eyes, Daniel saw a flicker of fear and pain. "You're going to be okay," Daniel said, his voice steady, even though his heart was pounding like a jackhammer. With trembling hands, the injured driver clutched Daniel's arm. "Thank you," he whispered. Then the paramedics arrived, racing out of their van. Before Daniel knew it, they were loading the man onto a stretcher. Blood was smeared across Daniel's vest and on his hands. But none of that mattered. He had done what he thought anyone with a conscience should do. He helped. When Daniel returned to the construction site, Mr. Garrity stood there, his face twisted in anger. "You have a job to do, Carter. We're short-handed today, and you leave in the middle of your shift to play hero." Daniel tried to explain that someone's life was at stake, but Garrity was unyielding. "Don't talk back," the boss growled. "I pay you to mix concrete, not save the world." Though the anger seemed disproportionate, Daniel suspected Garrity was also worried about potential liability issues. Legal entanglements could shut down a site, cause delays, and cost money. Garrity's focus was on the bottom line. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "I didn't have a choice. He was injured, boss. I couldn't just... What? Mind your own business." Garrity cut him off, voice trembling with indignation. "We had a scheduled pour, Carter. Now we're behind, because you decided to run off without clearance." Daniel felt humiliation, a reminder that in his station in life, compassion was rarely rewarded. There was no sign of empathy on Garrity's face. One of the site foremen came over but said nothing. Everyone knew challenging Garrity was a mistake. When the workday ended, Daniel trudged home in silence. He replayed the day's events over and over. Though drained, he believed he'd done the right thing. Still, an ominous dread gnawed at him, like a warning that more trouble was on the horizon. Sure enough, the next morning started with a vicious blow. Daniel arrived for his shift, only to be summoned to Garrity's makeshift office. The man's eyes were cold. "Carter, I'm letting you go," he said without ceremony. Daniel's heart sank. "Why?" "Because I tried to help someone." Garrity squinted, as though that question was outrageous. "You're an at-will employee. I don't owe you an explanation. Insubordination, leaving the site without authorization. Take your pick." He scribbled something on a pink slip. "Office will mail your final paycheck." Now get off my sight." Daniel left the office with a mix of shock and fury, carrying the pink slip in his trembling hand. Despair tugged at him, but the bigger question was, how would he pay his rent now? How would he afford groceries or keep the electricity on? As much as Daniel told himself he'd done the right thing, a bitter reality set in. Helping that stranger might have cost him his livelihood. That evening, Daniel roamed the streets, hoping a brisk walk might clear his head. He felt numb, as if the ground beneath him had crumbled. Every time he thought he'd found a measure of stability, life found a new way to knock him down. He used his last few dollars to buy bread and milk, worried that after the rent was due in a week, he'd be on the brink of eviction. He sent out a flurry of job applications online, though he had little faith. A recession had stung the local market, and even menial jobs were fiercely competitive. The mental weight felt suffocating. To distract himself, he recalled the face of the injured driver he had helped. He wondered if that man was okay. In all the chaos, Daniel never learned his name. Some part of Daniel wanted to visit him in the hospital, but he had no idea where to start. Maybe the local news would have a short segment about the accident, or maybe the man was already out of the hospital. Daniel said a silent prayer that the stranger was healing well. Sleep that night was elusive. The whir of a broken ceiling fan was all that kept him company, and it seemed to echo his sense of abandonment. Even so, Daniel couldn't shake a faint glimmer of hope. Something deep in his heart whispered that perhaps destiny wasn't done with him yet. The next day began like any other. Pale light filtered through Daniel's tattered curtains. He shrugged off the covers, bracing himself for another day of job hunting. If desperation had a sound, it was the soft creak of the floor under his weary feet. He sipped a glass of water, his stomach growling because he had no money left for a proper breakfast. Then came a roar from the skies, a thunderous vibration that rattled the glass in his windows. Puzzled, Daniel rushed to his window. A helicopter, massive, sleek, and undeniably expensive, was descending onto the vacant lot next to his apartment building. The ground trembled under the force of its spinning rotors. Neighbors poked their heads out, startled at the spectacle. 2 more helicopters appeared overhead, circling like giant mechanical birds, before slowly lowering themselves onto the gravel. Daniel's mind raced. The neighborhood was a poor one. Who on earth would fly helicopters here? Within minutes, men in dark suits and earpieces emerged from the first chopper, scanning the area as if they were Secret Service. Daniel watched in awe. He was about to turn away when one of the men pointed at his building. To his shock, they started walking straight toward his door. A firm knock rattled the thin wood of Daniel's apartment door. He opened it cautiously, heart in his throat, expecting some bizarre confrontation. Instead, he found a sharp-dressed man in his 40s with an impeccably tailored suit and a friendly but formal smile. "Mr. Carter," the man said. Daniel nodded, too dumbfounded to speak. "I'm Thomas Cole," said the stranger, extending a hand. "I work for Westwood Technologies. I believe you helped my employer yesterday." Suddenly, it clicked. Westwood Technologies was a giant in the tech industry, rumored to rival the scale of Tesla and Apple in certain research fields. The founder, Henry Westwood, was notoriously private, just a rumor in financial circles. Daniel's mouth went dry. Thomas continued, "I understand you saved Mr. Westwood's life. Please, he wishes to meet you in person." Before Daniel could process, the man guided him outside. "Don't worry. We'll take care of everything." Standing just outside his door, Daniel realized the entire block was gawking at him. Men in suits ushered him toward the helicopter. Anxiety and exhilaration tangled in his chest. Could this really be happening? was the driver he saved Henry Westwood himself. The iconic, reclusive millionaire who rarely showed up in headlines. Daniel stepped onto the helicopter's landing gear as the wind whipped at his clothes. The roar of the rotors overwhelmed any conversation. Moments later, he was strapped into a plush leather seat, and the helicopter soared upward, leaving his run-down apartment behind. Hovering over Cedar Heights, Daniel looked out the tinted window. The city's sprawling skyline stretched before him, and he wondered how drastically life had shifted in a mere 24 hours. He had no clue where they were headed, but adrenaline and curiosity kept him from questioning it too much. Thomas sat across from him, calmly tapping on a sleek tablet. A few more men in suits filled the cabin, speaking in hushed tones. Daniel felt underdressed in his worn jeans and faded t-shirt, but no one seemed to mind. The helicopter flew over the downtown core, soared past the swanky neighborhoods, and finally headed into the hills overlooking the city. Nestled there was a gated estate the size of which Daniel had never seen up close. The property had a sweeping driveway, manicured lawns, and a fountain that shimmered in the sun. Multiple buildings, guest houses, possibly, were scattered along the rolling green. A helipad marked by a large white H awaited them. After a smooth landing, Thomas helped Daniel out of the aircraft. A line of staff members stood by, each wearing an elegant uniform. It felt like a scene from a movie. At the far end of the helipad, a tall man with a bandaged forehead stepped forward, looking pale but determined. He wore a loose sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to the formal attire around him. Daniel recognized him at once, the driver he had saved. The man approached with a warm smile. "Daniel Carter," he asked, his voice carrying a gentle tremor. Daniel nodded. The man held out his hand. "I'm Henry Westwood. Thank you for saving my life." Struck by the reality of meeting this elusive billionaire, Daniel almost forgot to breathe. He shook Henry's hand, noticing that Henry's grip was firm despite the bandage and bruises. I'm glad you're okay," Daniel stammered. Henry's eyes shone with gratitude. "You did more than help. If not for you, I might not be standing here." He gestured toward the grand estate. "Please come inside. We have a lot to talk about." Guided by staff, Daniel and Henry made their way into the main house, which was even more luxurious on the inside. Polished marble floors, ornate chandeliers, and priceless artwork lined the halls. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a breathtaking view of Cedar Heights below. Despite the opulence, Daniel felt an undercurrent of sincerity in Henry's demeanor. They reached a sunlit parlor where a fire crackled softly in a marble fireplace. A nurse hovered in the background, waiting to change Henry's bandage or administer painkillers. Henry motioned for Daniel to sit on a plush couch. "Please make yourself comfortable. Can I get you coffee? Tea, anything?" Feeling overwhelmed, Daniel swallowed. Coffee would be nice." Henry nodded to a staff member who disappeared through a side door. Then the billionaire leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I know this is a lot to take in, but there's something I need to say." Henry took a deep breath as though steeling himself. "When I crashed, I wasn't just in a car accident. I was running away from a personal crisis, a deal that went bad, a betrayal by someone close to me. I had just found out that my chief financial officer embezzled millions from my company, and I lost my temper. I drove too fast, wasn't paying attention. Then it happened." He tapped the bandage on his forehead. I owe you a debt. You saved me from more than just physical harm. You reminded me there's still good in this world. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I just did what anyone with a conscience would do. Henry shook his head. No, not everyone. People were standing around gawking, but only you acted. That means something. He paused as if considering his next words carefully. I recently learned you lost your job because of this. That's unacceptable. Daniel's eyes widened. How had Henry discovered that so quickly? Then again, money and influence could open any door to information. It's true. But I'll be fine. Daniel lied, knowing he had no backup plan. Henry looked genuinely upset. Let me help. I want to offer you a position at Westwood Technologies, something that aligns with your skills. Or if you'd prefer, I can provide financial assistance for schooling or whatever else you might need. Daniel blinked, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say, yes, Henry said gently. I'm alive because of you. Let me do this. Daniel felt as though he were standing on a precipice, gazing into a new world. For someone who'd lived paycheck to paycheck, Henry's offer seemed like pure fantasy. Could he really work at one of the nation's most prestigious tech firms, even without a formal education? Sipping the coffee, a staff member handed him. Daniel managed to steady his nerves. This is too much, he said softly. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Henry gave him a kind smile. We can figure out the details together. I have an entire HR department that can find a role matching your strengths, or we could sponsor your education first. He hesitated. There's more. I'd like you to stay here at my estate for a while. I have a fully staffed guest house, and it will be far more comfortable than your current living situation. Daniel's eyes misted with gratitude, but also with lingering self-doubt. Why would you do all this for me? Henry's expression was resolute. Because it's the right thing to do, and because kindness should beget kindness. For a moment, Daniel was speechless. The entire staff seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his response. Finally, he nodded. All right, he said, voice thick with emotion. Thank you. True to his word, Henry dispatched one of his personal attorneys to negotiate a settlement with Daniel's former employer. Within days, Garrity's construction company faced a whirlwind of legal threats. Fearing a lawsuit or the ire of a powerful billionaire, Pines and Colonel agreed to a settlement that paid Daniel a considerable sum. Though the amount was modest by Henry's standards, it was more money than Daniel had ever seen at once. Daniel, still reeling from this sudden change of fortune, decided to pay off a few debts, including the back rent he owed. Then he made the difficult choice to terminate his lease, packing his meager belongings into a single duffel bag. As he left the rundown building, his landlord, once constantly on his back, watched in disbelief as a black limousine loaded his things. Good luck, Carter, the landlord said, half in awe, half in envy. Daniel gave a short wave, not entirely sure he believed in his own luck just yet. That evening, Daniel arrived at Henry's estate. Instead of feeling like a charity case, he felt like a guest at a resort. The guest house was tastefully furnished, with a cozy living area, a fully stocked kitchen, and even a small terrace overlooking the city. It was more space than Daniel had ever had in his life. He spent the first night wandering the grounds, discovering a garden bursting with roses and lilies. The estate staff were polite, offering him dinner and answering questions about the property. He learned that Henry Westwood employed nearly 50 people on site groundskeepers, chefs, assistants, and security personnel. The scale of Henry's operation was overwhelming. The next day, Daniel found himself in the back of a chauffeured sedan, heading to the headquarters of Westwood Technologies. The building was a modern architectural marvel. Sleek lines of glass and steel rose into the sky, reflecting the sunlight in dazzling patterns. The company's logo, a stylized W, glowed near the entrance. Thomas Cole met Daniel in the lobby. "This place can be intimidating," Thomas said, with a reassuring smile. "But don't worry. We're all here to help you settle in." They toured the facility, passing rows of offices and labs buzzing with research. It was a far cry from Daniel's usual environment of dust and sweat. He felt like a fish out of water, worried someone might realize he had no formal qualifications. Eventually, Thomas led him to a corner of the building reserved for philanthropic initiatives, a department that worked on global sustainability, education grants, and medical research funding. "Mr. Westwood suggested we start you here," Thomas explained. "He thinks your experience, empathy, and hands-on approach might be particularly well suited for these projects." The head of the philanthropic division, Dr. Regina Moore, extended a warm handshake. "We're excited to have you on board, Daniel. We focus on real-world impact. That means getting our hands dirty and traveling to communities that need help." Daniel nodded, both excited and nervous. This was a dream scenario, an opportunity to do something meaningful to help people on a global scale. Yet he knew he had a lot to learn. "I'll do my best," he said quietly. Dr. Moore offered a kind smile. "That's all we ask." Over the next few weeks, Daniel's life transformed at breakneck speed. He worked closely with Dr. Moore and her team, learning about project management, grant writing, and community outreach strategies. He poured himself into the tasks, staying up late to read articles and case studies, determined to catch up. Henry occasionally invited him to lunch, checking on his progress and overall well-being. During these meetings, Daniel saw another side of the tech mogul, one that was reflective, almost lonely. Despite all his wealth and success, Henry seemed guarded, as though he struggled with trust issues after the CFO's betrayal. One afternoon, while they dined at an upscale Japanese restaurant perched atop a downtown skyscraper, Henry asked Daniel a simple question: "What do you really want in life?" Caught off guard, Daniel took a moment to think. "I want stability," he said. "I've spent most of my life just trying to make ends meet. I also want to do something good for others, to give back the way you've given to me." Henry nodded, swirling his green tea in a porcelain cup. "If that's what you want, I'll help you. You can learn business fundamentals from some of the best mentors here. Perhaps one day you'll lead your own philanthropic programs, or whatever your heart desires." Daniel stared at the city below. For the first time, the future felt wide open, a canvas waiting for him to paint his own destiny. Amid this whirlwind, something else began to stir in Daniel's life. He met one of Henry's closest associates, a brilliant, compassionate woman named Elizabeth Liz Stanford. She was part of the philanthropic division, as well primarily overseeing operations in underprivileged communities worldwide. Liz was a Harvard graduate, fiercely intelligent, and carried herself with a warmth that put Daniel at ease. Their first interaction was unremarkable. She showed him how to prepare a proposal. But as days turned into weeks, they found themselves sharing personal stories over coffee, often staying late in the office to discuss projects. Liz was drawn to Daniel's sincerity, to the humble way he embraced opportunities without taking anything for granted. One evening, they worked side by side on a program aimed at rebuilding schools in rural areas. When they finally stood to stretch, the office was deserted. Liz looked at Daniel, her cheeks glowing under the fluorescent lights. "You know," she said softly, It's rare to see someone so genuine in this world. Most people in corporate philanthropy have agendas. Daniel's heart fluttered. Thank you. But I'm just learning, trying to find my place. She gazed into his eyes. I think you've found it, she said, a subtle smile curving her lips. A few weeks later, Henry announced a grand charity gala to raise funds for new tech-based educational initiatives. He personally invited Daniel to attend as his guest, an almost unbelievable notion for Daniel, who'd never even been to a formal dinner. And as if his anxiety wasn't already high, Liz sent him a text the day before, I'm going too. Don't worry, I'll help you through it. The night of the gala. Daniel dressed in a tailored suit gifted by Henry. He hardly recognized himself in the mirror. Gone were the grime-stained overalls replaced by a sleek charcoal ensemble that made him look almost regal. At the estate's front door, he found a limousine waiting. Once inside, his nerves collided with excitement as he imagined what the evening would bring. The venue was the Cedar Heights Grand Ballroom, an opulent place typically reserved for the city's elite gatherings. Under glittering chandeliers, tables were arrayed with fine china and crystal glasses. Donors, corporate executives, and local politicians mingled sipping champagne while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Daniel felt like an alien stepping onto a different planet. But his tension eased when Liz appeared by his side in an elegant, flowing gown of midnight blue. She flashed him an encouraging smile. You look amazing, she said, looping her arm through his. He blushed, still feeling out of place. Thanks. You're breathtaking, he managed to say, trying not to stumble over his words. Liz simply laughed, and they drifted into the main hall. Throughout the night, Daniel met countless business titans, some of whom recognized him as the guy who saved Henry Westwood. Congratulatory handshakes were plentiful, and for once in his life, Daniel felt a sense of validation that he'd never experienced before. Toward the gala's midpoint, Henry took the stage to speak about his vision for global education. He championed Daniel as a testament to the power of compassion, making Daniel the reluctant center of attention. After a wave of applause, Henry stepped down, looking proud. As Daniel made his way to the refreshment table, a middle-aged man with a sharp jawline approached him. So you're the new favorite, the man sneered, swirling a glass of whiskey. I hear you were a nobody until Henry plucked you from obscurity. Daniel blinked in surprise. I'm sorry. Do we know each other? The man smirked. Name's Greg Sutherland. I used to work at Westwood Technologies. Been in this game a long time. You think Henry's generosity is permanent? Trust me. I've seen him drop people just as fast. Daniel felt a surge of defensiveness. Look, I don't know what your problem is. Henry's been nothing but kind to me. Sutherland scoffed. Kind, sure. But don't forget, if you're not useful to him, you'll be cast aside. That's the nature of big money. He stepped closer, voice dripping with contempt. Enjoy it while it lasts, boy. Fortune is fickle. Before Daniel could respond, Sutherland melted into the crowd, leaving him shaken. Liz found Daniel noticing his pale face. What's wrong? She asked gently, touching his arm. Daniel forced a smile. It's nothing. Just some bitter ex-employee. Let's get some fresh air. They walked outside onto a balcony, the city lights of Cedar Heights sparkling below. Daniel inhaled the cool night air, trying to let the tension drift away. Liz pressed against him, sharing her warmth. If it helps, Henry fired Greg for unethical behavior, Liz whispered. Some rumored insider trading. Don't let him get into your head. Daniel nodded, the tension easing. I won't. I've come too far to be scared off. Yet, despite the reassurance, Greg Sutherland's words gnawed at Daniel. He couldn't entirely dismiss the idea that corporate loyalty might hinge on one's utility. He'd learned the hard way in construction that loyalty didn't always mean job security. As he climbed the corporate ladder, he worried about losing sight of who he was and whether Henry's generosity had an expiration date. His concerns grew more pronounced when he saw how others in the office regarded him. Some whispered behind his back, calling him the boss's pet. Rumors circulated that Daniel had charmed Henry only to secure personal gain, while Dr. Moore and Liz continued to support him. Not everyone was on his side. One evening, Henry invited Daniel and Liz to dinner at an exclusive restaurant in Cedar Heights, the kind where reservations were made months in advance. In a private dining room, Henry was unusually subdued, pushing his food around on the plate rather than eating it. My CFO's trial is coming up, Henry finally said, referencing the man who had embezzled company funds. I've worked hard to build a better environment here. But trust is a fragile thing. He paused, looking directly at Daniel. I hope you're settling in okay. I know there can be tension in the ranks. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. I am, though some folks question why I'm here. They think I haven't earned it. Henry's voice was gentle but firm. Let them. In time, your work will speak for itself. He glanced at Liz, giving her a knowing smile. You've got good people at your side. Liz squeezed Daniel's hand under the table. We'll prove them wrong. Over the following months, Daniel's bond with Liz deepened into something neither of them had anticipated. They shared late nights in the philanthropic department, fine-tuning proposals and discussing new ideas. Gradually, their closeness transcended professional camaraderie. They began to spend weekends together, visiting art exhibits, hiking the trails near Henry's estate, or even just grabbing a burger at a local joint. Liz admired Daniel's resilience and sincerity, while Daniel was captivated by her intellect and unwavering optimism. Their differences complemented each other. She was analytical and strategic, while he was empathetic and hands-on. It wasn't long before Liz confided in Daniel about her own insecurities, that she sometimes felt overshadowed by the corporate world's materialism. In return, Daniel opened up about the hardships of his childhood, how he'd grown up in a single-parent home where finances were always tight, and how he dropped out of community college to help his mother pay the bills. Liz listened with teary eyes, softly pressing his hand. They found comfort in each other, forging a bond that felt as solid as bedrock. On a crisp autumn night, Daniel took a bold step. They were strolling through Henry's garden, the moonlight illuminating a canopy of colorful leaves. Daniel stopped by a rose bush and gently plucked a bloom, offering it to Liz. I don't have fancy words, he said, heart pounding. But I know that what I feel for you is more than just friendship. Liz's eyes glistened. I feel it too, she whispered, stepping closer. They kissed under the moonlit sky, the rose clutched between them, a new chapter unfolding in both their lives. Even as romance blossomed, life at Westwood Technologies was not without challenges. A crisis arose in the philanthropic department when one of the overseas programs was accused of misallocating funds. The media pounced on it, framing it as a scandal that could tarnish Henry Westwood's reputation. Dr. Moore convened an emergency meeting. We have to investigate thoroughly. The press is calling it a slush fund scandal. She looked at Daniel. I'll need your help reaching out to the communities we funded. We need transparency. Feeling the weight of responsibility, Daniel jumped in. Over the next weeks, he worked tirelessly, poring over documents, emailing local contacts, and verifying each expense. The stress mounted especially when tabloids began painting Westwood Technologies as a corrupt corporation. Daniel worried that Henry might blame him if the investigation turned sour. But Henry remained steadfast. "We're going to clear our name." "The truth will come out," he reassured Daniel in a private meeting. "Just keep doing what you're doing." Liz also faced backlash, as she was part of the leadership. Some in the office whispered about the rookies who didn't have a handle on the department. Trying to protect each other, Liz and Daniel often worked late, sometimes falling asleep on the office couches, their laptops balanced precariously on their laps. Eventually, Daniel and Dr. Moore discovered the source of the problem, a local liaison who had embezzled funds and falsified reports. Armed with this proof, they confronted him, threatening legal action if he didn't return the stolen money. Henry flew into a controlled rage when he learned how the liaison had exploited the philanthropic mission for personal gain. With methodical precision, Henry's legal team squashed the scandal, issuing a public statement detailing the findings. Daniel's meticulous research became the backbone of that statement, earning him praise not just from Henry, but from media outlets that recognized his role in the cleanup. The philanthropic division's reputation was restored, and donations surged as the public commended Westwood Technologies for its swift and transparent approach. After the crisis subsided, Dr. Moore organized a small celebration at a local bar. She raised a glass. To Daniel, she toasted, "Our relentless investigator, and a testament to why good people belong in positions of influence." Blushing at the attention, Daniel smiled. Liz beamed at him, feeling proud and relieved. With the scandal behind them, the philanthropic division gained new momentum. More projects were greenlit, focused on clean water education and sustainable housing. Henry also took a back seat on certain endeavors, trusting Daniel's judgment more and more. Daniel found himself shouldering significant responsibility, managing teams both domestically and abroad. By now, Daniel and Liz were inseparable, sharing not just professional but intimate personal moments. They had become each other's anchor in a sea of corporate storms. In stolen moments, they'd reminisce about how far Daniel had come from an impoverished construction worker to a rising star in philanthropy. And yet Daniel's humility persisted. He never forgot the day he lost his job because he chose to help a stranger. Sometimes Liz would catch him gazing out a window, lost in thought. She'd place a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You deserve this life," she'd remind him, seeing the flickers of doubt that occasionally haunted him. Maybe he'd reply, exhaling softly, "But I'll never take it for granted." Despite the progress, not everyone was thrilled about Daniel's skyrocketing success. Greg Sutherland, now working for a rival tech firm, reappeared with a new rumor that Daniel had orchestrated the philanthropic scandal to oust certain people and gain power. He fed these lies to tabloids, hungry for sensational headlines. Suddenly, Daniel found himself in a new media circus, with headlines proclaiming Westwood's protégé staged slush fund for promotion. Henry promptly sued the tabloids for defamation, but public opinion started to sway. Some stockholders began to question Daniel's integrity, echoing Sutherland's claims that he was an opportunist. The negative press deeply troubled Daniel. He didn't want to be a source of controversy for Henry, who had given him everything. He considered stepping down, but Henry halted that thought immediately. "If you step down now, you'll validate their lies," Henry said sternly. "We stand by you." Liz also begged him to stay, reminding him that giving in to bullies like Sutherland was never the solution. "We'll clear your name again," she insisted, her conviction unwavering. So they fought marshalling legal resources and credible testimonials from overseas partners. Friends and colleagues who knew Daniel well came forward vouching for his honesty. The tide turned when the so-called sources for the tabloids couldn't produce any real evidence. Sutherland's scheme collapsed under scrutiny, and the story died. Yet the ordeal left a scar on Daniel's psyche. It reminded him that fortune could be fleeting, that not everyone cherished integrity or fairness, and that envy was an ever-present threat in the corporate world. After the dust settled, Henry noticed a strain in Daniel's demeanor. He invited Daniel to a weekend retreat at his private cabin, a secluded haven by a crystal blue lake surrounded by towering pines. Liz came along hoping that nature might revive Daniel's spirit. The cabin was modest compared to Henry's estate, but still luxurious by most standards. Inside, a stone fireplace crackled warmly, and the scent of cedar filled the rooms. Henry, Daniel, and Liz spent the first day hiking along a wooded trail, the fresh air and scenic overlooks offering a welcome escape from the relentless city. That evening, they settled on a wooden pier that stretched out into the lake. Orange and pink hues painted the sky as the sun dipped below the horizon. Henry rested on a deck chair, while Daniel and Liz sat side by side, their legs dangling over the water. Henry spoke softly. "When I was your age, I trusted the wrong people. Lost millions, nearly went bankrupt. But that loss taught me resilience. You either let adversity break you, or you use it to become stronger." Daniel nodded, eyes fixed on the rippling water. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up, and this will all be gone." Liz leaned her head on his shoulder. "It won't. Not if we keep building, trusting each other, and standing for what's right." A comforting silence fell among them as the stars began to appear overhead. Daniel breathed in the crisp air, feeling a renewed sense of gratitude. It was in these still moments that he understood the true gift Henry had given him, not just a job or financial security, but the opportunity to reclaim his self-worth. Later that night, the trio gathered around the fireplace in the cabin's living room. They sipped hot cocoa as the flames cast dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Henry opened up about his personal struggles, his difficult childhood, his unstoppable ambition to never live in poverty again, and how that ambition sometimes blinded him to the genuineness of others. Liz spoke of her own family, how they doubted her philanthropic career choice when she could have pursued a lucrative role in corporate law. "At least now I can prove that success and compassion aren't mutually exclusive," she said, smiling at Daniel. Daniel eventually found the courage to share deeper parts of his past, the nights he went hungry, the guilt he felt about leaving school to support his mother, and how lonely it was when she passed away a few years prior. He'd had no support system, just an unyielding resolve to survive. By the time they all turned in for the night, a profound sense of closeness had formed. This was no longer just an employer-employee relationship. It was friendship, kinship, and in Daniel's case with Liz, it was love. Returning to Cedar Heights with renewed energy, Daniel threw himself into philanthropic work. Under Dr. Moore's guidance, he led a new campaign focusing on literacy programs in underserved communities. The initiative received a warm public reception, with local newspapers hailing Daniel as a beacon of hope. Around this time, Henry's injuries had fully healed, allowing him to resume his frenetic schedule of board meetings and negotiations. He was also in talks to collaborate with Mark Cuban on a new educational tech fund, a side project that garnered significant media attention. Though it was hush-hush rumors swirled that the collaboration could lead to large-scale, learning platforms with a global impact. Henry brought Daniel into some of those discussions, valuing his perspective on grassroots needs. This level of trust confirmed how far Daniel had come. He found himself speaking confidently in rooms full of powerful people, always mindful to remember the shy laborer he used to be. Daniel had never considered himself the kind of man who made grand romantic gestures. But when it came to Liz, he wanted everything to be perfect. Their love had grown not just in the quiet hours of work or the adrenaline of crisis, but in laughter shared over coffee and glances across the room during meetings, and in the quiet confidence they found in each other's presence. So one frosty winter evening, Daniel decided it was time. He spent days planning in secret, enlisting the help of Henry's estate staff to craft an unforgettable night. The guest house, his temporary home, was transformed into a warm cocoon of intimacy and elegance. Candles flickered softly along the windowsills. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. The estate chef prepared Liz's favorite meal, roasted salmon in lemon butter sauce, served with wild rice sautéed asparagus and a delicate lavender sorbet for dessert. Daniel wore a crisp white shirt and charcoal trousers, his palms damp with nervous anticipation. He checked the clock repeatedly, heart racing as the minutes ticked down. When Liz arrived, bundled in a long burgundy coat, her smile lit up the room. "You've been busy," she said, glancing around, her eyes sparkling with surprise. He helped her out of the coat, revealing a simple navy dress that made his breath catch. "Only for you," he said, pulling out her chair with a gentle smile. They dined slowly, savoring each bite, the conversation flowing easily. They laughed about past blunders, recalled their first awkward meetings, and spoke with hope about projects they still wanted to pursue. As dessert was cleared away, Daniel's nerves surged. Standing, he reached for her hand. "There's something I need to tell you." Liz looked up, curiosity mixing with affection. He guided her toward the fireplace, where a small velvet box waited on the mantel. Taking it in his hand, he turned to face her fully. "I never thought my life would lead here," he began, voice trembling just enough to betray his emotion. "There was a time when I didn't believe I deserved happiness. But you showed me what love looks like. You've stood by me, challenged me, believed in me." Liz's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Daniel dropped to one knee, the ring box in his hand now open to reveal a single, brilliant diamond nestled in a delicate platinum band. "Liz Stanford, will you marry me?" For a second, everything was silent, just the crackle of the fire and the soft hum of winter wind against the windows. Then Liz dropped to her knees with him wrapping her arms around his neck. "Yes," she whispered through happy tears. "Yes, Daniel. 1,000 times yes." They kissed, surrounded by the warmth of the room, by the dreams they'd built together. As snow began to fall gently outside, dusting the garden in silver, their future had never looked brighter or more certain. The news of Daniel and Liz's engagement sent a wave of joy through the halls of Westwood Technologies. Colleagues who once questioned Daniel's presence now celebrated him with heartfelt congratulations. Emails flooded in handshakes turned warmer, and even those who had previously doubted his journey showed reluctant admiration. Dr. Regina Moore couldn't help but grin every time she passed Daniel in the office. "You're our golden boy," she teased, a rising star in philanthropy and in romance. Henry Westwood, beaming with pride, offered to host the wedding on his estate, insisting it was the least he could do for two people who had come to mean so much to him personally and professionally. Preparations moved swiftly with Henry, sparing no detail from imported flowers to gourmet chefs flown in for the occasion. Still, Daniel insisted on keeping the guest list intimate, prioritizing sincerity over spectacle. One morning, Daniel received a surprising phone call from his old landlord. The man, having caught wind of Daniel's newfound success, called to offer his congratulations and subtly hinted at a donation to repair the apartment building's perpetually leaking roof. Daniel smiled gently into the phone. "I can't offer personal funding," he replied, "but I'll help you apply for community development grants. There are programs that support housing improvements for underfunded properties." It was a simple, quiet victory. The same landlord who once hounded Daniel with eviction notices was now looking to him for guidance. Finally, the wedding day arrived. The Westwood estate had been transformed into a breathtaking garden cathedral. Rows of white chairs stretched across freshly manicured lawns, bordered by lavender roses and blooming cherry blossoms. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the sweet scent of spring through the air. Daniel stood at the altar, clad in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. His heart pounded as guests began to arrive, colleagues, philanthropic partners, and even a few neighbors from his old building. Some beneficiaries from his charitable programs had flown in from abroad bearing gifts of handmade crafts and tearful gratitude. The diversity of guests reflected Daniel's journey, a life now stitched together by compassion, resilience, and second chances. Then the moment came. Liz appeared at the top of the aisle, her white gown catching the sunlight in shimmering ripples. Her father escorted her with visible pride, and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. As she walked toward him, the world seemed to narrow into a single point of light and love. They exchanged vows under the open sky, promising to face every storm side by side. When they kissed, cheers erupted from every corner of the garden. Henry, seated in the front row, wiped away a quiet tear, an unspoken tribute to the man whose courage had changed both of their lives. Daniel looked around at friends old and knew this wasn't the end of a journey. It was the beginning of a legacy built not on wealth, but on the quiet power of choosing kindness. In the end, Daniel's journey from a struggling construction worker to a celebrated philanthropist and loving husband reminds us how a single act of compassion can transform a life. His decision to risk everything for a stranger, Henry Westwood, unlocked new possibilities. Through unwavering kindness, perseverance, and the power of human connection, Daniel overcame joblessness and adversity, found genuine love, and discovered a purpose far beyond his imagination. Yet this story is about more than luck or money. It's about the indomitable human spirit. We all face setbacks. What matters is having the courage to stand by our values and embrace second chances. If you found this story inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Help us spread the message that a single selfless act can ripple into extraordinary change. Let's make compassion a global movement, one story at a time.